My name is Wes Stephenson, and I'm the only child of my late father, Stewart, and my mom, Donna Stephenson, who is here with me tonight. When I was contacted earlier this year to let us know that my dad was receiving this honor, we were obviously very humbled and proud that his legacy will continue to live on in this way. What I did not realize at the time was that I was going to have to write a speech that properly represents my dad and the reasons why he belongs in the Hall of Fame. It is impossible for me to speak for my dad and reminisce about all the significant games he called, and of course the different stories that I'm sure went along with them. All I can do is try to paint a picture through a son who idolized his dad and everything that he did. Growing up the son of Stewart Stephenson in Decatur, Alabama was not always the easiest. My dad was basically a local legend in our community. He helped lead Decatur to their only state basketball championship in 1970. After playing college basketball at Athens College, where he met my mom, they made Decatur their home. As a youngster at school and basketball camps, or anywhere for that matter, I would be asked over and over, "Is Stewart Stephenson your dad?" I was not the athlete my dad was. So much of the time, my last name felt like added pressure. Of course, as I grew older, this perceived burden turned into a blessing. To stay close to the game that had given my dad so much, he decided to become an official. He started out doing both basketball and volleyball. From an early age, I remember loading up in the back seat and heading to whatever gym it would be that night. As I grew older, I began to want to go with my dad, whenever possible, to whatever game he was calling that night. Many times we would be joined in the car with other officials, like Don Stanford, Gary and Keith Spivey, and Thomas Owens, just to name a few. These guys, and others like them, were not only his colleagues, but they became like brothers to my dad. People in North Alabama would see them show up to a game, and they would refer to them as the Dream Team. My dad officiated basketball at about every level, from junior high, high school, junior college, and NAIA. He had to keep his referee bag packed at all times. My dad loved the camaraderie with his fellow officials, and he especially enjoyed taking younger officials under his wing. One night, I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and I got to go with my dad to call a game in Town Creek at the famed Hazelwood High School. If you don't know the history of this powerhouse, look it up. I will never forget walking into the school that night. It was like stepping into an athletic shrine. State championship trophies littered the glass cases as you entered the gym. A massive poster of Pierre Good as a former Gatorade High School Player of the Year hung above them. The gym was packed that night, as I'm sure it was for every game. As in old gyms, the bleachers were right next to the floor, and there were always fans standing and lining the court. The crew that night was my dad, Don Stanford, and they had brought a young guy with them to help mentor and bring him along. At halftime, I would follow the referees into their dressing room, sometimes bringing them a drink or just wanted to hear what they had to say about the first half. This night, the new guy looked at my dad and Don. He was shooken up. He said, "What are we going to do about the fans standing around the court? I'm going to run into someone." They both kind of chuckled, and my dad said, "You're just going to have to run around them, son." Lesson learned. My dad took officiating very seriously. When we watched college games on TV, we would study the mechanics of guys like John Clockerty, Jim Burr, and Andre Patillo. I was the only kid in middle school who could name basketball officials. My dad's demeanor would change when he was working a game. At home, my dad was one of the most laid-back and patient guys around. But on the court, he was in charge. He could be stern with coaches, but could communicate with them in other ways as well. I remember a time Dad was calling a big area game at Austin High School, who was coached by Alabama Sports Hall of Famer Bob Hart. Coach Hart was also a scratch golfer. There was a bang-bang block charge that didn't go Coach Hart's way, and he was letting my dad have it. The next time down, Dad ran in front of him and said, "Coach, you look at that tape in the morning, and if I miss that one, I'll bring you a dozen Titleists." Coach calmed down, and the situation was diffused, And as my dad likes to point out, he didn't call the next day. In closing, all the inductees here tonight are being honored for their commitment to their craft and the excellence you achieved at it in this state. But for many of you, the relationships that were formed with fellow officials and the experiences shared in those big games are things you cherish the most. I know it was for my dad. Thank you.